Hey, Tommy from the Run Testers. In this video, we're going to be doing our full review of the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3. Let's have a look. The Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3 costs £195 or $230. It weighs 187 grams or 6.6 ounces for men in a size 8, and the drop is 8mm. The Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3 sees some developments over the earlier versions of the shoe. The most important of those is a 4mm increase in stack height, alongside some tweaking of the Nitrofoam Elite Aliphatic TPU midsole. The aim here is for more energy return and a lighter design. There's also a slightly stiffer carbon power plate to improve running efficiency, as well as provide stability across the length of the shoe. The Ultra Weave Mono Mesh upper uses a 4-way stretch construction to minimise weight and friction, whilst also providing a surprising level of structure and cushioning for such a light shoe. The shoe also features a modest level of the brand's excellent Puma Grip outsole to provide a high level of traction and some protection for the midsole foam.
When it comes to the size of the Deviate Nitro Elite 3, I've got my normal size here, which is a UK 9 or a US 10. It's the same size I've had across Puma's range, and it has been fine for pretty much every other shoe, but with the Deviate Nitro Elite 3, I found it ran a little bit long for me. It's got quite a torpedo-like shaping, very tapered at the front there, and I'd have rather gone for half a size down, because I'm generally on the fence in between two sizes, which is an 8.5 or a 9 in the UK, or a 9.5 or a 10 in the US, and in the case of this shoe, I think the smaller size would have been the one to go for. It has been fine for my run test though, just a little bit of extra length hasn't really affected the running experience too much, and I've had no problems at all with the fit around the midfoot and heel, good lockdown, no rubbing or anything like that. So yeah, I think for the most part stick with your normal size, but if you're right in between two sizes, I think the smaller one would be the better one to go for with this shoe.
So fit has remained very good for me overall in the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3. I've got one in UK size 8, that's my typical running shoe size, and that is a shoe size generally that works for me in Puma shoes. I haven't really had to kind of really look at, kind of play around with the sizing. I would say it's a very unfussy racing, kind of faster focus shoe to put on and get off, which I quite like. It's very light, thin, breathable, the kind of things you'd want from a racing shoe. I've been very happy with the space up front in the toes. I think, some might feel like it's a touch long. It has been an issue for me in my runs, but it might mean maybe looking at playing around the sizing. But I think for me in my runs, it's been absolutely fine. Midfoot hold, kind of heel lockdown, been absolutely fine. Had no real issues in there. Pretty kind of standard fair lacing as well. I quite like the fact that the tongue is not overly skinny. There is a little bit of padding there, a little bit like the heel. It's not overly padded, and I quite like that. And it doesn't add to the overall weight of the shoe. It's not the lightest shoe out there, but I think I like having those kind of extra elements in terms of the padding there. So for me, going true to size has been absolutely fine. I do think some might find like the spacing up front there maybe does make it a little bit long, but I don't think, as I said, it's been an issue for me. And going true to size has worked for me in my testing.
So the fit for me in the Nitro Elite 3, I am a size 8 in the UK. I found this to be a really comfortable shoe. It has, I think, a bit more space in it than I have expected from the previous two versions. They were quite a lean fit. They were a race shoe, that you expect that from a race shoe. But for some people, I think they may have been a little bit too tight on the feet, maybe. But I think there's a bit more space in this shoe. It definitely feels like there's more space in the forefoot, a little bit more in front of the toes. I would stay to my size in this, but if you're on the fence, you might be able to size down half a size if you want that really tight fit. But I would stay to my size in the shoe because I like having that little bit of extra wiggle room in the toes.
So I've run 60k in the Deviate Nitro Elite 3, using it for a variety of workouts, including a couple of quite long workouts and a 10k race on mixed terrain, a really hilly race with my club on mostly trails actually, with a bit of road sprinkled in here and there. I'm a really big fan of the shoe in general. I think it's the best racing shoe Puma's released yet. I do like this new Nitro Elite foam with that aliphatic TPU in there. It's got a really responsive ride. Like, it's not very soft and squishy, and you don't really feel like a huge amount of bounce, but you definitely get a really good amount of energy return. It's got that firmish but comfortable platform to run fast in and run long in, and yeah, really delivers in all the ways I like racing shoes to deliver. It actually reminds me a little bit of the foam that Asics is using in the Metaspeed Paris series. It's probably not quite as bouncy as that foam, but it has that similar feeling of maybe being a little firmer than some of the other racing foams on the market, but giving you loads of response and bounce back as a result. So the longest workout I did in the shoe was a 10 times 1k rep workout, doing those reps at around 320 per k pace. Ended up doing about 22k in the shoe in total, and yeah, felt very comfortable and protective over that distance, especially for some parts of that run I was running with the backpack to and from where I was doing the workout and that kind of thing. And yeah, it's got a really nice feel underfoot, doesn't get harsh at all. I feel this would be a comfortable shoe to go into distances like the marathon, but it has got a nice light and poppy feel for those shorter reps, and I think it'll be a good short distance racer as well. Definitely has a bit more about it in terms of comfort than the previous versions of the shoe, which are very light and nimble feeling, but the extra foam underfoot here doesn't really take away much of that. It still feels like a very agile shoe whilst giving you a lot more comfort under the forefoot in particular, I would say. Also done longer reps in the shoe, done 2k reps on a workout which had a long section warming up and cooling down along a canal toe path, and that is another advantage with this shoe. You have got that excellent Puma grip outsole, which we've raved about pretty much all of Puma shoes, and it's in place here, and it came into play when I did that 10k race, which was, like I say, on a mix of road, some forest tracks, some gravel tracks, that kind of thing. And in particular, there was a couple of sections where you were bombing down like a steep downhill, which was a little bit loose underfoot with a kind of gravelly dirt path, and you really can commit to that kind of descent fast in the shoe because the grip is so reliable from Puma Grip. Had no concerns at all about bombing it down that. And then also it gave nice reliable purchase when you're trying to get up a hill as fast as possible. You don't want your foot slipping at all. You just want to keep turning the feet over, and that's where the lightness of the shoe helped as well. In that race there were also sections with kind of long bits on the road, even slight downhills, and you're still getting all that bounce and propulsion you expect to get from a carbon plate shoe like this. So yeah, really ticked every box on that race all round. Really enjoyed using it, and although it was a really hard race with lots of hills and, like I say, trail sections, and in the evening, which I'm not always the best at racing in the evening, I really enjoyed the shoe for it.
So in terms of my running time in the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3, I've really tried to focus on the types of runs that Puma ultimately wants you to really use this shoe for. So that is kind of racing, but also running at your faster kind of race paces. So I have raced at 5k in this shoe. I did the run through Lee Valley Velo Park 5k in it. Then I've kind of run at my 10k pace, half marathon pace, kind of marathon pace as well too. I think overall in my running time with this shoe, kind of sticking to those types of runs, this shoe has felt very good. I think with the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 2, I think, Puma got a lot of things right with that shoe. I think particularly from the upper and the outsole side of things. I think from the midsole point of view, I think it was lacking a little bit for me. I think particularly it just lacked a little bit of pop for me compared to those other kind of top tier carbon racing shoes. I feel like that has changed here. This kind of new midsole compound really delivers something that's a bit more propulsive, bouncy, aggressive, all the things that I would want in a racing shoe. I think most people would want in a racing shoe. And I think you have that in abundance now here with the Deviate Nitro Elite 3. I think from a shorter distance point of view, I think it's worked very well for me. I think kind of roll through very nicely in this shoe from hill to toe. Those kind of transitions, those quick transitions that you want to see in a shoe. I do think you get that real nice pop from this shoe now. I think the big thing for me is how it would handle over those longer distances. Would it be able to maintain that feel over, I think, maybe 5k and 10k over those kind of hour plus long runs? I think ultimately it has done that for me. I think the main thing for me, and it's not a major criticism, I think maybe I would like to see a little bit more foam up front in the forefoot, which I think a little bit like Metaspeed Sky Plus, that's what we're getting, a little bit softer, a little bit more forgiving at the forefoot. But I think ultimately, I felt comfortable running a lot longer in this, and I just felt like it felt more enjoyable and more lively to run longer in this shoe. I would say it's less stable than the previous shoe. I wouldn't say it is massively unstable when you compare it to some other kind of carbon racing shoes, but I do think that is a difference from, what you're getting in the makeup of this shoe. It is a little bit more, less stable, but I don't think compared to other shoes, it is as unstable. I think in terms of the upper, I still love the upper in the shoe, and I think the changes have made it a better one or just a more refined one. And then the outsole is great. Another great Puma kind of outsole. My last run in the shoe was a really treacherous, rainy run, and the grip really held up very well on that run. Gripped, kind of turning kind of corners. It felt very good to do so. And I feel like if you're going to have a slightly trickier course, then I think this is going to hold up very well. Maybe it's not the lightest shoe, but I think the weight has been very good for me, and I think still makes it a good, well suited for racing. In terms of that kind of outsole kind of wear, I mean, the exposed areas is getting a little bit beaten up now, but I think ultimately there is enough, I think, protection to, in the key areas for it to still kind of handle a decent amount of running. I do still think it's one you're going to save for your faster races and that kind of racing time, and maybe it's lost a little bit of that kind of more durable kind of daily trainer up-tempo racing shoe feel, but I think it can handle some of that, but I think ultimately I'd be saving it for my racing time. And as I said, my faster race pace training sessions, but all very positive for me on the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3. I think, carrying over the good stuff from the upper and the outsole, but changing that midsole that really kind of makes it more of a kind of exciting, bouncy, aggressive running shoe to racing, but also to run at your kind of quicker paces. And that's what I found in my time.
So Puma has made a number of race shoes over the past few years. You've got the earlier two versions of these shoes. You've got the Fast R, you've got the Fast Forward, but none of those shoes really worked particularly well for me over all distances. The Deviate Nitro Elite series is essentially their counterpart to things like the Vaporfly and the Alphafly, where it's a shoe that's designed to take you from 5k all the way up to marathon distance. Problem with those shoes is they were a little bit firm for me. They lacked the bounce that I like in a shoe. They weren't very soft, and I really like them for 5Ks and 10Ks. Anything over that, they just didn't really work for me very well, so I never really picked them up for anything like a half marathon or a marathon. Now, with the new Deviate Nitro Elite 3, that has changed because there is now this 4mm update in the stack height of the shoe. It's got this new tweaked aliphatic TPU midsole, this nitrogen-infused foam that you find across all of most of Puma's shoes. But it does feel very different. So with that extra stack height and the slight tweak, I think it also has a slightly stiffer plate as well. You get a very different ride from the earlier versions. Now it feels a lot more like a shoe, like the Vaporfly, like the Alphafly, where there's a bit more bounce in it. It just feels like there's a nice level of energy return in these shoes, in this shoe now, that just feels really nice. It's a shoe that I've raced in this twice now, and I've done a couple of easier runs in this. I've only got up to 10 miles in this shoe because I'm not training that hard at the moment. But over those runs that I've done, it's just felt like a completely new race shoe, and I think it's one that really does fit into that top tier of race shoes now, where you could use it for a half marathon, you could use it for a marathon, and it feels comparable with a lot of those other shoes. I've mentioned the Nike shoes there, but there's also things like the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris. It's a similar style of shoe to that now. It's definitely got a bit more energy return in it. It's definitely got a bit more speed. It's an incredibly light shoe. It's even lighter than it was before. And you really do notice that out on the run. You can pick up the pace in this really, really quickly, and it feels absolutely great. So for me, over those runs, one of the runs that I did in it was the Eastbourne 10K, which I didn't get a PB in because I'm not as fit as I was last year. But I did feel like it was a shoe that I really enjoyed running in. From the off, it just felt like it clicked into gear for me, and it just rolled forward, and I could just pick up the pace really nicely. I didn't really feel the shoe that much on the feet. It's not like the Alphafly where there's a big feel of squish in it, but when you try and notice it, you do feel that midsole in that. It does feel really good now in comparison to the earlier ones. I know some people quite liked the early ones because maybe some people don't necessarily like as much entry return as bounce as I do, but for me it's definitely a development that's really making a big difference to how this shoe feels. That slightly stiffer plate works alongside the softer midsole really well as well, and just gives you that really comfortable, cruising, speedy feel that you want when you're doing longer distance efforts. So it's really, really good for that. I would say that it's a relatively stable shoe as well. Even with the additional stack height, it didn't feel unstable to me at all on the run. The outsole for me, so this is where I've got one problem, but so it has Puma grip on, which is one of the best outsoles on the market. One of the races I did was almost a trail run, so it was on a lot of harder compact surfaces, rocky surfaces, things like that, and it worked really well on those. I felt like it had a good level of grip. I wouldn't normally take my carbon plate race shoes out if I was going on something that was a bit traily, but I thought I'd give it a go with this. One problem I've had with it, and this isn't to do with the trail, this is to do with this was coming off the first time I used it. As you may know if you watch the channel, I tend to destroy the outsole of shoes, specifically this back section of the shoe. So I've already ripped off the rubber on here because I'm maybe dragging my foot slightly. It is a very small bit of rubber covering that back bit of the shoe, and that's normally when I rip it off. So it's definitely something for me to look out for. I'm not sure if something's going to affect other people, but definitely this has happened to me on a few different shoes, and I'd love to find a way to not do it, but a little bit less durability for me on this shoe than I've seen on previous versions. Other than that, I found it to be a fantastic, speedy, top tier race shoe now, and I'm really, really enjoying this shoe. I also think the upper is really comfortable. It's just got the right level of padding on it, and it does feel nice and breathable.
At Verdict, I think the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3 is an excellent racing shoe and it's right up there with the best I've tested this year. Personally, I would still prefer the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris. I still think that's my favourite racing shoe. I think it's just a bit lighter than this shoe and you get a little bit more back from the foams in the midsole. And I also really do like the Nike Alpha 3 if you want that slightly softer, springier feeling, which you don't get quite so much of with this shoe. But in terms of actual pure performance that you can lace this shoe up, pretty confident you're going to be on a level with every other shoe out there when you hit your race there. Puma's really knocked it out of the park with this shoe. I think it's a really impressive racing shoe all round. And certainly I think the best shoe that Puma's produced so far. Like, I like the Fast R2, it had a fun ride and I like the foam in it, but you now got that foam in this more lightweight, nimble package with a continuous midsole design that for me just works a little bit better and helping me to turn over my feet as a heel striker rolling from heel to toe. I just prefer a continuous midsole like this compared to the the chunks you have on the Fast R2. Mentioned a couple of times, it's not quite as springy and soft as some of the shoes on the market, so if you're really seeking that feeling in your carbon racing shoe, you could look at something like the Hoka Cielo X1 or the New Balance SC Elite V4. They're a bit softer underfoot than this shoe, but I don't think this really lacks in comfort in any way. I think you do get a bit more spring from the Alpha Fly 3, like I say, and also the Nike Vaporfly 3 has a slightly softer feeling underfoot while also being super lightweight and great for any distance. So definitely alternatives on the market. I still, like I say, prefer the Asics above all, and I'd probably still have the Nikes just a little bit ahead of this Puma shoe, but I really think it's a great all-distance racing shoe and it will suit a lot of people really well. Definitely is good value as well, especially in the UK where it's coming in under £200. I think that's a great price on RRP. And with Puma, there's always a chance you're going to spot it in a sale before long because they do seem to reduce their shoes a bit more than other brands. And if you do see it in a deal or even at full price, especially in the UK, you can go in knowing you're not just getting a great value shoe, but just a great racing shoe, full stop.
So my verdict on the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3, I think it's fantastic release from Puma. I think previously, all of the race shoes that they've done that I've liked to an extent for shorter distances, for fun, faster sessions, track, things like that. I never found a shoe that I really would have picked up for a marathon. Now this shoe, I'd be more than happy to use this for a half marathon or a marathon. It just feels like there's a lot more to it. Energy return, bounce, just comfort. It's just a great all-round shoe that I think will be able to deal with most distances, and I'll probably look at using this for a half marathon coming up in the near future to test it out over that. Over race distances, it feels absolutely great. For somebody like me who likes bounce and cushioning and softness, it just feels like it's hitting that really on the nose now, and very much enjoyed running in all of those runs. So it's definitely a big improvement for me. I think it's a really, really good modification on the previous versions without being too far removed. If you like the previous versions, you're not going to be massively surprised by this shoe. So I think overall, I think it's a big hit from Puma, and I expect to see big things from this shoe coming up and a lot more people using Puma race shoes when it comes to the longer distances.
So my verdict on the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3 is that this is definitely an upgrade on the Deviate Nitro Elite 2. And this feels like a proper racer to me. I think if I had a 5K, 10K, half marathon, I think potentially a full marathon as well too, this is a shoe that I'd happily, I think, kind of grab and lace up and go out and race it in. And I think that is testament to Puma, kind of looking at the changes it needs to make from the previous shoe, retaining the good qualities of that shoe, I think particularly the upper and the outsole department, and really upgrading what you get in the midsole and what that delivers in terms of the ride and experience. And it just feels like a much more enjoyable shoe to run a little bit faster in. Now I think about comparing it to the other kind of new kind of top tier carbon racing shoes that I've raced in. I look at things like the New Balance SC Elite V4, which I've run a marathon in this year, the Saucony Dolphin Pro 4, which I have done a lot of my kind of longer marathon training runs in as well too. I think those are probably more accessible shoes. They're kind of bouncy, kind of more comfortable shoes. I think this has a little bit more of a lively, more aggressive ride in comparison. I think if that's something you prefer, then I think that's what this shoe is going to give you over those two shoes. I think of things like the Hoka Cielo X1. I think that gives you a bit more protection over longer distances compared to the Deviate Nitro Elite 3. Then you've got things like the Metaspeed Sky Plus, which I think we would say is, for us, the kind of the best of the racing shoes, the lightest, that kind of more aggressive, propulsive feeling. There's qualities of this shoe here, and I think it's not far off it, and maybe a few tweaks might, make it kind of, a little bit closer in comparison with the Metaspeed Sky, but I think that probably sits at the top there for me in terms of that kind of all-out kind of racing feel. And then obviously you've got the Vaporfly 3 and the Alphafly, which I haven't raced in the latest one, but I have run in previous versions, but I think it's more in keeping with those top-tier racing shoes, and I think that's a key thing for me. I do think that was the case with the Deviate Nitro Elite 2, but I think the upgrades and the changes that Puma has made here definitely put it up there with the best there. And ultimately, I've had a really kind of good experience racing in this shoe, and I think thumbs up to Puma for the changes they've made here, because it has made it a better shoe overall for me.
That's it from us on this review of the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click that little bell. And if you're going to Catch and Blow, you can find a link to our podcast, which comes out at the end of each month. Thanks a lot for watching. Catch you next time.